Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Learner's Guide. Today we've got another of our daily Pride Month decks. This is deck number 20 and it's titled Pan Pride. And if you haven't seen the rest of these episodes, what we're doing is building a commander deck for Magic the Gathering using two non-partner commanders, working with a budget of $100 or less, and using this as a way to celebrate the diversity of the LGBTQ+ community every day for all of June. So for today, our two partners are going to be Kutzil, Malamet Exemplar, and Grumgully the Generous. So Kutzil is 1 green-white for a 3/3 legendary creature cat warrior. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, and whenever one or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Then Grumgully is 1 red-green for a 3/3 legendary creature goblin shaman. Each other non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter. So you might notice these two both work relatively well with +1/+1 counters, so the goal is obviously to give +1/+1 counters to all of our creatures, and that is going to be the main focus as we move into our themes for today. So the first theme, as we've already mentioned, are going to be +1/+1 counters. And to that end, we have something like Crowned Ceratok, which is 3 and a green for a 4/3 creature rhino. It's got trample, and each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. So one of our main focuses is to make sure that all of our creatures have a +1/+1 counter, meaning they all get access to the abilities provided by some of our other creatures because they give abilities to creatures with +1/+1 counters. Our second theme is pretty similar. This is going to be modified creatures. So modified creatures refers to any creature that has a counter, an aura, or is equipped. And so to that end, we have Guardian of the Forgotten, which is 3 and a white for a 4/4 creature elephant warrior. It's got vigilance, and whenever a modified creature you control dies, manifest the top card of your library. So this is a great way to ensure that if someone board wipes us while we have a ton of modified creatures or creatures just with +1/+1 counters, it means that we are going to get a ton of manifested cards and kind of just restock our board and get us into a position where we're able to more effectively bounce back from the board wipe in a way that we may not be able to without it. And then finally, our last theme for today is going to be drawing cards. Now, Tributary Instructor is a little bit of a weird one for this, so bear with me, but it is 3 and a green for a 4/4 Merfolk Shaman with Mentor, so whenever it attacks, you put a counter on target attacking creature that has less power, and whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, draw a card. Because our main focus here is to put as many creatures into play as possible and get them to be quite large, we are almost always going to look like a threat to the rest of the table, meaning they're going to want to kill our creatures, they're going to want to slow us down, and we need to make sure that if we play into a board wipe, we're not just going to get punished by immediately losing our board, having no cards in hand, and just stumbling around the rest of the game. So as weird as it is to build around dying and drawing cards, it's still going to be important that we can refill our hand in the eventual case that someone decides to deal with the threat that we are posing. That, though, is the end of our themes for today, so the next thing we're going to do is take a look at some key cards. And these are cards that really synergize well with what our deck is trying to do, and in some cases are win conditions or value engines, but are mainly just the most valuable cards in the deck. Not necessarily money-wise, but mechanically. So first up, we have Cathedral Acolyte, which is 1 and a green for a 1/2 human cleric. Each creature you control with a counter on it has Ward 1, then you can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature that entered the battlefield this turn. This is one of the best ways in the deck to protect our creatures, because if we're giving everything Ward 1, it is much more likely that people don't really want to spend that extra mana just to clear away a creature, so it helps push removal somewhere else, it helps protect our things, and even that 1 extra mana in some cases is too much for our opponents. So I think to that end, Cathedral Acolyte deserves a spot as a key card. moving on to our second key card. This one is Thundering Raiju, which is 2 red for a 3/3 spirit. It's got haste, and whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then, Thundering Raiju deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of modified creatures you control other than Thundering Raiju. So, as I mentioned earlier, our main goal with this deck is to make sure that all of our creatures have counters on them at any given point in the game. So whenever we would attack with Raiju, we're putting a counter on a creature, which is going to be relevant, and then doing damage to each opponent equal to the number of creatures we have with counters. And it's not unlikely that it's 5+ creatures, meaning that this thing is doing 5 damage to each opponent every time we swing, plus the 3 from itself, basically doing 18 damage on its own. So I think Thundering Raiju also deserves a spot as a key card and can pretty much grow with the game and become an unstoppable threat if our opponents can't deal with our board. And then finally, our last key card for today is going to be Nil's Discipline Enforcer, which is 2 and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature human cleric. At the beginning of your end step, for each player, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature that player controls, and each creature with 1 or more counters on it can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless its controller pays X, where X is the number of counters on that creature. So this is both a great way to put counters on our own things, and also play a little bit of politics and have our opponents not attack us, because it's harder for them to attack us when their creatures have counters. And Nils is a card that I've put in a lot of decks in the past, and I have always seen it overperform. People are always happy to get the counters, always happy to attack someone else, and by the time they kind of decide, oh, maybe their creature's big enough, they don't need any more counters, and so they're debating on whether they should attack you, it's probably too expensive for them to attack at that point, so it's very relevant to get Nils down early, and it puts in a lot of work as the game goes on. That, though, is the end of our key cards for today, so the next thing we're going to do is take a look at some cool interactions in the deck. And these are cards that synergize really well together, and in a lot of cases are just fun cards that I want to highlight. So first up, we have Envoy of the Ancestors and Ian the Reckless. So Envoy of the Ancestors, 2 and a white for a 2/3 human cleric. It has Outlast for 1 white, so we can pay a white, tap it, and put a +1/+1 counter on it, but only as a sorcery. And modified creatures you control have lifelink. So obviously, that pairs really well with Ian the Reckless, which is 1 and a red for a 2/1 legendary creature human warrior. Whenever Ian attacks, if it's modified, you may have it deal damage equal to its power to you and any target. The way that this works in practice is if Ian is modified, then it's going to be triggering its own ability and also be getting lifelink from Envoy of the Ancestors, meaning that when Ian attacks, if it just has one single +1/+1 counter and has 3 power, we get to do 3 damage to ourselves and any other target. But because Ian is the one doing the damage and Ian has lifelink, we will gain 6 life because we dealt 3 to ourselves and 3 to someone else, effectively putting us up 3 life from where we started because of the 3 that we already had to take. So the bigger that Ian gets, the more damage it can deal, the more life we're going to gain, and the bigger the creatures we can take down. Plus, it's any target, so if we wanted to point this at our opponents, we can do that as well. That, though, is the end of cool interaction number 1, so moving on to cool interaction number 2, we have Sovereign Okinek Ahau and Aki Battle Squad. So Sovereign is 2 green-white for a 3/4 legendary creature cat noble. It's got Ward 2, and whenever it attacks, for each creature you control with power greater than that creature's base power, put a number of +1/+1 counters on that creature equal to the difference. Then, Aki Battle Squad, 5 and a red for a 6/6 Goblin Samurai. Whenever 1 or more modified creatures you control attack, untap all modified creatures you control, and after this combat phase, there's an additional combat phase, but this ability triggers only once each turn. So in other words, if we attack with a creature with a +1/+1 counter with Aki Battle Squad, we will get an additional combat. The Sovereign is going to see that we are attacking with a creature that has power greater than its base power, even if it's just the 1+1/+1 counter, meaning it's going to put a +1/+1 counter on that creature because the difference is only 1. That's just for the first combat though. We can attack for the second combat, and now that creature has 2 +1/+1 counters, so there's a difference of 2 between its base power and what it has, and it will get 2 +1/+1 counters. And this is exponential, so then it goes to 4, 8, 16, 32, and we can do this to our entire board every time we attack, and we can attack twice a turn with the battle squad. So this combination of cards very quickly ends the game and essentially puts us in a position where we can hit our opponents for a bunch of damage kind of out of nowhere. Anyway though, that is the end of our cool interaction section. So the last thing I want to do for this deck tech is take a look at the price of the deck. And today, our deck came in at $45.54, with the most expensive card being Uncivil Unrest at $8.48. So Uncivil Unrest is 4 and a red for an enchantment. Non-token creatures you control have Riot, and if a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. This is one of those cards that can also kind of just win the game out of nowhere, essentially allowing us to deal double damage with our entire board because we are hoping to put counters on all of them. Plus, it's giving everything Riot, so if we have something like Grumgully, which is already putting a +1/+1 counter on our creatures, we can use Riot to give our creatures haste, meaning we can put a creature in, put a counter on it, give it haste, and then immediately hit someone for double damage. So Uncivil Unrest can really make us a threat at the table and put us in a position where we can easily win games. That though is the end of our deck tech for today. So thank you all so much to everybody for watching. Thank you for liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And if you would like to go a little bit above and beyond, you can always find us over on Patreon, patreon.com/dungeonlearnersguide, and right here on YouTube as a channel member. So once again, thank you to everybody for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful Pride Month, and I will see you on the other side of the Dungeon Learner's Guide.